Welcome to Scotland Speaks at our usual time of 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and much has been happening this week and indeed in Alba Party as our nominations have closed for the various positions which you'll be voting on, those of you who are members of the party, in the period starting shortly and leading up to our annual conference which takes place in Edinburgh on the 28th and 29th of March. So if you've not bought your tickets, please join us. The nominations, of course, have closed, as I have said, but the hustings are starting today and at 2 o'clock in Glasgow at Woodside Halls. If you just sign up now to attend, you can watch the leadership hustings, which will include our two leadership candidates, Ash Regan and Kenny McCaskill, and our two deputy leadership candidates, Christopher McElhenney and Neil Hanvey. So come and hear what they have to say and ask your questions, if you're a member of the Alba Party, of course. And if you can't make today in Glasgow, then tomorrow in Edinburgh, same time at 2 o'clock, you'll have the opportunity to do so. So please register online and we hope to see you at one of those hustings. Now, there's been a huge response to last week's show featuring none other than Fergus Ewing. He had much to say about Alex Salmond, about Scotland, about independence and about what next. So here's a few clips from last week's show.
Well, I think these last 4 years have been the wasted years. They've been the years of disillusionment, because I do think, and it's not personal, that the Scottish Government have really destroyed their own reputation over the last 4 years, not least by entering into a pact with the extremist Greens that was manifestly dire, a pact for which the current First Minister was the architect, incidentally, of the deal. But also obsession with things which to most people seem to be peripheral. I mean, everybody in Scotland that I know wants to be treated with reasonable courtesy and respect, and everybody to be treated that way, irrespective of who they are, what they come from, what their skin colour is, what their personal views are. But for this to have become such an apparent obsession, so that we sit up till 1 in the morning on voting on transgender issues, I know very few people who are not mystified and baffled, but also angry that we're not focusing on sorting out the bread and butter basics and getting the huge problems in our public services sorted out. Even finding a couple of ferries to buy at a reasonable price might be quite a good start. I can't imagine, Tasmina, that Alec would have got involved in a single item like this.
And here's some of what you had to say of your many comments. Catherine says, great to hear positive comments on Alex Salmond's leadership. He deserves to be remembered well due to his contributions. The dream will never die. Kizzy Wiz says, another great show. Lovely to hear from Fergus, although I don't agree with him about Cape Forbes. Her implementation of free ports in Scotland is disastrous for our country. Thanks again, Tasmina. We do need to speak about Alex often. Donald says, the truth will out. Amen to that. I hope it happens before rather than after our nation has been damaged beyond repair. Ernest says, Scottish people need to unite and take our country back from the English establishment thieves. SN for RFF says, love these shows. Pauline Brown says, thank you all for presenting to us a most heartwarming show. How lovely to share stories of Alex. What a great man. With regards to the discussion between Tasmina and Mr Fergus Ewing, fantastic. Measured, intelligent and confident. We need strong people like you to continue to promote independence for Scotland once more. A regular mantra in our household, if Alex had been in charge, we would most definitely now be an independent country. You are so right, Pauline. He would have continued, Pauline says, guiding us forwards after the 2014 vote. Thank you again for the work you do for the great cause, and we believe we'll get there. God bless Alex Salmond. Gobbles Gal says, well done both of you. Always interesting, invariably informative, and an inspiration to all independentistas. Thanks, Taz. John says, when Fergus Ewing mentioned the prospect of Alex Salmond going back to Holyrood, I realised again how much we need him and how much he will be missed. What a prospect it would have been to have Alex back in the Scottish Parliament, his old stomping ground, which I'm sure would have brought some life back to the place, for sure. He should never have resigned after the referendum. We agree. Gordon says, what a wonderful interview. I remember briefly being praised by Winnie at the SNP National Assembly as a smart young man, as a young nationalist leader from Kilmarnock. Think Again says, I'm not pro-independence, but one thing I do respect about Salmond was that he was against involvement in foreign wars and consistently so. I wish people of all parties would think about that. Equally, the Reform Party is going to win a lot of seats in Scotland this time round, and I hope there's an iron wall built around them. People, unionists and pro-independence, need to show that this way of thinking isn't welcome in Scotland. Pat Bannon says, another good show, and Fergus was really good. It's a pity your mum, of course she means Fergus's mum Winnie, isn't here now, because by God she would shake up the system and the SNP. She surely would. And now to this week's show, where coming up after the break, we'll be hearing from Colin McInnes, the chair and founder of Homeless Project Scotland. Stay tuned and we'll see you then. Welcome back. I'm delighted and privileged to be joined by Colin McInnes, the chair and founder of Homeless Project Scotland. Colin, welcome to Scotland Speaks.
Thank you for having me.
Colin, tell us about Homeless Project Scotland. Why do you exist? Why do you need to exist?
So Homeless Project Scotland needs to exist to support homeless and vulnerable people across the country. At the moment, Scotland has the strongest homeless legislation in the world. But what we have in paper in Scotland and what we do in practice in Scotland is two big different things.
Now, your organisation does a number of different things under its big banner. Completely volunteers, no paid staff whatsoever, yet you provide food every night, hot food every night, shelters, night shelters, which we'll come to in a minute, food vans and advocacy for homeless people who need people to represent them. Talk to me first about the importance of the night shelters.
So the importance of our night shelter is that we can give a warm, safe, comfortable bed to people, 33 people every night in Glasgow. That's people from all across the country. Some people come from Oban, some people come from the Bartonshire, some people come from Glasgow. So that night shelter is really, really important because it gives that person that safe sanctuary to be while we ask the council to fulfil their duty of care and give that person accommodation that they need. That person is somewhere safe to rest.
Now, given we have this legislation, why is it the case that people have to come to you for help and from as far and wide as Oban, as you just suggested? How do they know about you? Why do they need to come to you?
Because local authorities ask people to come to our shelter because they don't have the resources, they won't find the resources, and they will not provide the duty of care that they have, and they will not abide by their statutory responsibilities that the Scottish Government put in place to say that homeless people have the right to accommodation.
Now, I visited your night shelter and you have 33 beds. Do you have 33 people coming every night? Less than that? More than that?
We have an average about 55 people coming to our shelter every night. Since January 2024 till today, we have provided over 19,500 people in Glasgow a safe, warm bed to sleep.
And what do you do then? Because you don't have enough provision for the number of people who are looking for beds. What happens when people turn up and there's There's nowhere for them to go.
Unfortunately, it's heartbreaking for us. We have to supply people with a sleeping bag, we have to supply them with a sleep pod, and we have to basically accommodate that person on the street.
Obviously, you have more people coming than the beds that you have, and it must be really difficult for you and your team to turn people away. Yep. How do you assess? Is it first come, first serve?
Our main priority are obviously families and children. We have families and children who come and use our shelter. We have mothers that turn up with their trunks and their children. They maybe have domestic abuse, they may be in a state of fear of living where they are, and the first place to come is our shelter. It takes me back to memory of a woman actually on Christmas Day who walked the streets with her baby in a pram for 6 hours, came across our shelter, and we supported that lady through accessing the social work services to get her into accommodation. Now, that accommodation was a hotel room with a bed, no facilities to cook for her baby, no facilities to heat her baby's bottles up, no facilities to fend as a human being to look after her child.
Why is that the case, Colin? Why is the system failing these people?
Because the system does not care. Politicians have just become absolute maniacs. They're all interested in politics, they're not interested in humanity. People who are in politics right now, in charge of this country, have forgotten about the people of this country. And they're concentrating on money, budgets, and arguing in parliaments, and not actually concentrating on the mother who's pushing the pram in -1 conditions.
But you are, you're strong advocates of what you do, because I know you believe in your bones that you want to help these people. And all of your volunteers who are just fantastic, fantastic people, feel exactly the same way, compassionate people. You're always prodding politicians on social media to say, come and see us, come and help us.
Yeah.
Who's come to see you and what have they done?
We ask politicians to come and see us and come and see the work we're doing, to come and sit and have a cup of tea with the lady that comes who's 87 with dementia, who has no other option but to come and get mince and tatties at our service. We're asking politicians to come and see what we do, engage with the people who are suffering. We don't want their money, we don't want their commission, we don't want any slice of their pie that they have. We're asking them to come and actually see, because seeing is believing. Come down and see what's actually happening at Homeless Project Scotland. Come and see the 350 people that come through our doors night after night after night, and the 55,000 hot meals that get served from our kitchen on a monthly basis in Glasgow's kitchen. That's what we say. We've had multiple politicians come and visit. We've had Patrick Harvey who comes, who's very uncomfortable with vulnerable people, very uncomfortable with dirty homeless people.
In what sense?
Well, I stood beside the man when he put his gloves on and he held his fingers and handed over a dish to a homeless person. That person's a human being. That person needs love, nurture, and needs a hug and needs to be told, it's all right, here's a hot dinner for you. But obviously that was Patrick Harvey. Then we had obviously Douglas Ross, who came down, engaged with the service users, and done his tour of the soup kitchen, tapped his fiver, got his picture with the van, and went up the road. Then we had obviously we had other politicians come down who were councillors. So we had Susan Aitken that came.
Of course, she's the leader of Glasgow City Council. What does Susan Aitken, what do Glasgow City Council have to say for the fact that you're providing a service that should be being provided?
Susan Aitken came down with her officers, and I remember the visit very vividly, where she came into our building. She stood at the front entrance. She looked around for 10 minutes. She then went across the road, avoided the queue of 300 people, pranced down the tables, and says, I have another prior engagement, I need to catch my taxi.
That's the local authority. What about our parliamentarians in Scotland? First Ministers of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, Humza Yousaf, John Swinney, have any of them been to see you?
None of them have accepted our multiple invites. So we invited Nicola Sturgeon 6 separate times. She never came once.
Did her office respond?
Her office responded, her deputy private secretary responded to say that she was too busy to engage with us, and she never came. We had volunteers who lived in her constituency who went to her constituency surgeries and asked her in person, could she come? And her words were, no matter how many times you come here and ask me to visit, the answer is still the same, no.
The reason being?
The reason being is that she's in denial that the country is suffering.
Okay, that's Nicola. What about former First Minister Humza Yousaf?
So obviously Humza, we wrote to Humza several times, 2-3 times. Again, his deputy private secretary, who was probably the same as Nicola Sturgeon's, wrote to us and said no, his diary commitments didn't allow him to come and visit us.
Did he have a shop was there a shop in his constituency that was...
So we had a charity shop in Govan Road. It was actually a couple of doors down from his constituency office. And we had obviously wrote to them, we'd contacted the constituency office to say, hello, we are your constituents, we have a business shop in your constituency, can we come and speak to you? No reply.
And John Swinney, I'm just going to go through them and hope you're going to tell me someone's been there.
John Swinney, again, wrote to John Swinney. There's a letter that's publicly online on their Facebook page. And again, this secret private deputy secretary had wrote to us and says that his diary was too busy. So I think that they should maybe look at maybe an alternative diary calendar that maybe involves more kind of actually engaging with poverty and engaging with people who are suffering in this country.
See, they would say that they do. They would say that they have policies that care about people who've got good social care. They look at a more equitable and just society. I mean, I don't know what your politics are, Colin. Maybe you'll tell me. But how does it make you feel that none of these First Ministers have come to see the work that you do and meet the people who need to use your service to eat and to sleep?
It makes me feel as sick as a dog. It makes me feel angry, and it makes my bones absolutely boil. That people are suffering, they're coming through our doors, they're starving. I have children drawing me pictures, thanking me for their bellies no hurting after they leave us, after they've ate food from our service. We live in Scotland, one of the richest countries in the world, but the people don't see the pounds of this country. And it angers me so much as a person and a human being. And I will keep going and going and going and going until I drop, till the people of this country get what they need and they get what they deserve.
If you didn't, Colin, provide this service at night time for these people, food and shelter, and we're talking about women and children as well, where would they be going?
They would be sleeping on the streets. They would be going frantically around the streets trying to access phone boxes to phone councils that don't work. They'd be phoning people who pass the buck to the next person. They'd be phoning this other person to pass the buck for this other person. I remember vividly a service manager who I won't mention the name of, who is in charge of over 8 local authorities in Scotland's out of hours emergency service. And I told her, homeless laws and legislations and powers in Scotland are the most strongest in the world for homelessness. And she said to me, the law is neither here or there.
The point being what? It doesn't matter what the law says?
Point being, it doesn't matter what the law says, it doesn't matter what politicians say, it doesn't matter what the convener of homelessness of Glasgow says. We don't have any resources, we can't give anybody nothing. Tough.
So the problem is, despite what the legal obligations are, on the ground provision isn't there.
The problem is, when the roots of a tree is rotting, the tree is dead.
What about the UK government? Have you had engagement from the Labour government? I would be presuming that Labour politicians may have attended. I mean, has Anas been there?
So Anas has been and visited our service, engaged with our service users.
Anas Sarwar, I should say, sorry, the leader of Scottish Labour.
Has engaged with our service, so he has for many years. He has raised questions in Parliament Jackie Baillie. Jackie Baillie has also raised questions in Parliament. Pam Duncan
Clancy, yes.
Glancy raised questions and challenged.
Okay, so they've raised questions in the Scottish Parliament.
Yeah.
Have they asked the UK Prime Minister to do something about the issue? I mean, we do have a Labour government at Westminster.
Well, what I can say that the Labour government have done is they've met with myself and my co-founder. We have both been in Downing Street, standing in the living room of the Prime Minister. He's listened to what we've said. He's took our details and he has promised to listen. Now that's more than what any First Minister of this country has done in 5 years for our homeless people when it comes to our charity.
How does it make you feel?
It makes me extremely angry as somebody who was a card-carrying member of the SNP, as somebody that put flyers through people's doors for a referendum. It makes me absolutely furious that the UK Prime Minister, regardless of their political party, is a very busy person for the country, can meet with us, talk with us for 10 minutes, introduce us to his family, shake our hands, but our First Minister of Scotland can't even write a letter to us, make a phone call to us, or come down and see the suffering.
Let's hope that off the back of this programme you get the visit that you so need. Let's talk a wee bit further about the work that you do. So we've covered the night shelter every night. We know we've got 33 beds. We know you have to turn people away, unfortunately. We don't know where they go because there isn't anywhere for them to go. Some people come back the next day in hope of getting somewhere to sleep. You also, of course, provide food every night. Where do you provide that food and how many people are you feeding?
So we're in a very lucky position at the moment that Barry Cushley, who is a businessman in Glasgow, we were out the street, we were cold, we were suffering as volunteers and the homeless.
Serving under the bridge.
Yes, so we're under the bridge, Halen's umbrella, and we were suffering, and we obviously were appealing for a building, appealing for help, and this businessman Barry Cushley came along and he said, listen guys, he says, I have a building that's empty, he says, and you are more than welcome to use it. He says, you use it for what you need to help these people of this city. And we did. And it was a 3 months beginning, 3 months proposal to say, let's do this for 3 months during the winter months and help and support you. Mm-hmm. We're now into nearly a year and a half. And we, working with Barry, we have now, in the last couple of weeks, obviously had discussions to see how we can help people more. Through Barry's, obviously, Quest for Success, charity of his own, is partnered with us. And we couldn't provide the shelter, we couldn't provide the soup kitchen welfare service that we provide without his support. We are feeding at the moment 55,000 hot meals a month from our Glassford Street service. We are seeing over 350 people coming through our doors every single day to collect sandwiches, to collect hot food, to collect drinks, to sit, chat with their friends and stay warm.
And you do get local businesses giving you food, donations have been in at Greg's, I think.
Yep. So we're supported by Greg's, we're supported by Coca-Cola, we're supported by Tantrum Donuts, we're supported by Pret a Manger, we're supported by the local businessman, the shop across the road will give us stuff that he's going to have to throw out. We've diverted over 39 tonnes of food waste a month from landfill to nutritious meals to help and support people. So we're supporting our environment, we're supporting our hungry bellies, and we're coming together as an army of human beings to support people.
And your army of human beings, they're all volunteers.
Every single person within Homeless Project Scotland, from the top to the bottom, is all volunteers.
And how many of you are there? Are you on a sort of rolling cycle, or do people come and go as they're able to when they've got space in their
We have over 4,500 volunteers across Scotland. We have over 15 vans across the country. We have large vans, small vans, fridge vans.
And does everything go from Glasgow around Scotland? Is that your central point, or do you have bases in other parts of Scotland?
Glasgow is our central hub, but we cover the whole country. We were asked a question by the charity regulator when we were registered as a charity, and it's always stuck with me. And they said, how can you be a national charity across Scotland? And we said, because we can. And they said, well, if somebody needed a food parcel in Oban, Campbelltown, Inverary, how do you get it to them? I said, there's such a great thing called DPD.
Well, you do it. You actually use this parcel service.
Parcel service to send food to people. So we do. We have also, as well, it's a very unique thing in our charity. We are the first charity to launch our national homeless helpline in Scotland. So we have a dedicated national homeless helpline. So it's a number of 0800 999 2477. People can call that number 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year.
Manned by your team of volunteers, listening to what stories of people looking for help, and then putting them in touch with local authority.
Yes,
Local authorities.
It's about people phoning our volunteers. We triage that call, we assist that person the best we can, and we signpost them, and we take their hand from the street to the pillow. That's what we do at Homeless Project Scotland.
And people find out about you, people in need find out about you, I'm presuming, by word of mouth. People just saying, if you're desperate, this is where to go. How do you get your message out?
By people who are suffering, telling other people who are suffering. And by people sharing what their experience has been. We have a lot of people who come through our service suffering, who we support, and they come back to volunteer. So they do. Now, but one thing that really upsets me again, and I would like to ask the people of Scotland, why is the Scottish Government refusing to list their national homeless helpline number for free on their website?
Well, this is a question that
why?
We've asked in this programme.
Why would you, as a government who is caring, compassionate, wanting to help your people of Scotland and want to kind of hug round everybody of Scotland and support them, but we'll not give you a number that could save your life, we'll leave that out?
What's the reason you've been given for that?
We're not a commissioned service because we won't accept money to be told what to do.
Right. That's a very interesting piece of information, I think, for everybody who's watching this programme. You provide advocacy services, you've talked about that via the telephone service that you provide, but also for people who are coming and looking for help. When I visited you, I met people with stories, that unimaginable circumstances, some of that have come from, and some in situations where they didn't expect that they'd be where they were, that day and that night. You must have such a range of people looking for help. What can we do? What can those watching this programme do to help? I know you've got the support of Mike Daly, who's been another guest of the show. We're a huge support of what he does. He's currently suing the Scottish and UK governments, respectively, for the Fannings case about the winter fuel payment. He does work for your charity, but I think he's obviously overloaded with lots of work as well. Are you looking for more people to take on cases for you?
First of all, I would like to personally thank Mike Daly for the work that he does. That is a man who puts his money where his mouth is. That is a man that takes the bull by the horns and removes the horns. And he supports people and he does what he says he's going to do. And if we could clone Mike Daly, the country would be a better place.
That's a lovely thing to say.
Mike Daly has supported us and had our back from day one. He supports us and helps us to raise GRs and take it right to the end to force the hand of the council to do what they should be doing and to do what the Scottish Government legislation tells them to do. But Government Law are overwhelmed. Mike Daly is overwhelmed, underfunded, and unfortunately can't obviously provide the amount of service that we require.
So we need more. You need more lawyers. Pro bono work.
At the moment, what we say is, if you're a civil solicitor watching this programme, if you are somebody who's got rights of audience for the Court of Session, please pick up your keyboard, pick up your phone, send us an email and say, I'll donate a day a week, I'll donate a day a month, because you donating your time for that couple of hours will save a life.
After the break, Colin, we're going to discuss a former First Minister of Scotland who has visited your project. I know you've got some stories to tell us about him. We'll see you after the break when we'll talk about Alex Salmond.
Water is life, but not all water is equal. Our water ionizer restructures and alkalizes water for optimum hydration and detoxification, recreating the planet's ultimate water sources, found in lightning-struck lakes and newly melted icebergs. H2 Pure Source. Change your water. Change your life.
Welcome back to Scotland Speaks, where I'm delighted and privileged to be joined by the chair and founder of Homeless Project Scotland, Colin McInnes. Colin, Alex Salmond. Now, Alex Salmond visited Homeless Project Scotland 3 times in 2 years. Talk me through the visits. The first one, I think, was when he was serving at the soup kitchen in the cold under the bridge in central Glasgow.
So the first time I had the privilege of meeting Alex Salmond is, when he came along to underneath the bridge. And when he arrived, he was keen to get that pinny on and get behind that table and serve the hot meals to the people that needed that meal. He was welcomed by everybody. Everybody wanted to shake his hand. Everybody wanted a selfie. I still have some of the selfies today.
Was he happy to shake everybody's hand?
Happy to shake everybody's hand. Happy to give people hugs. Happy to talk to everybody and support everybody. And basically, he was people's hero. And people could resonate when he was the First Minister. And he was. I remember him saying, "What do you need me to do? I'm here. Use me how you need to use me." And we said, "We need you an apron." He said, "Right, I'll get the apron on, I'll get the gloves on." And he served food and he done the dishes, he engaged with all the volunteers, he engaged with all the service users, and he was the same level as everybody there. He never came across as somebody who was any better than anybody else. And he came across as a human being.
And that must have meant quite a lot to your team of volunteers, and obviously the users of the service that you were providing. Was he must have enjoyed engaging with people and serving up good hot food.
Yeah, he enjoyed serving food. I think he spent around about 4 or 5 hours with us that night. I remember he was reminiscing about the Healing Umbrella, and he was telling the homeless people the history of the umbrella and the history of people who used to come down from the Highlands and use that umbrella. And he was a great guy, absolutely great guy. So he was. I also remember as well that he signed a pledge, and he signed a pledge to the people. I still have that pledge, and he signed that pledge to say that he would support. He would support the homeless people. He would support Homeless Project Scotland, and we had obviously a discussion about buildings. One of your biggest problem at that time was we didn't have a building, and his question was, why not? And I said to him, because the First Minister doesn't have power to give us a building. He said, rubbish. He says, when I was the First Minister of Scotland, I'm the First Minister. He said, I'm elected by the people, put in the position as in charge of this country, and if the people need a building, I would be saying that the people get a building. He says, it was my job to do what had to be done. I wasn't there to be told what to do, I was there to tell people what needed done. And that made the hairs stand up the back of my neck, because that was a man who was a voice for the people.
Now, I know he was very impressed with the system you've got for donations, where actually you can just tap a card to make a donation. Tell me a bit about that.
I remember. I think his bank fraud department would have been going absolutely nuts, because that card hit that window that many times. I think it blocked it.
Explain what you mean about.
We asked him basically if we could. We asked him could he pose for a picture, and he didn't have to tap his card off the window. He said, "What do you mean?" He says, "My card will be tapping off the window." He said, "Because I'll give as many fivers as this card allows me to give."
So explain, when you're saying tap it on the window, right? Yeah. Is it? It's obviously.
So we had a window graphic, and we had a machine on the window that basically accepted £5 donations. And every time you put your card next to it, contactless, it would take £5 donation off every time you put the card to it. I couldn't tell you how many times he had tapped the window. I think he nearly broke it the time they hit the window of the card. But he wasn't shy. He wasn't shy about giving that, and he organised some other stuff behind the scenes as well for us to get chicken, to make food, and he engaged us with other contacts, and that man cared for the people.
And I know he wrote to various people he knew seeking help for your organisation.
He did. He wrote to Network Rail about the building that we were in. He wrote to people within the Privy Council, and he tried to engage with as many people as he possibly could with his contacts to make sure that Homeless Project Scotland didn't become homeless.
And then his final visit a few months ago was to the night shelter at Glassbridge Street.
Yep.
And he came in, I was with him, Colin, and spent hours there talking to the staff and obviously the people who needed to use the service, and those who were standing outside who couldn't get in that night. Yeah. Tell me a bit about that visit, because you spent a lot of time with him.
He came to visit the night shelter. He went in the rooms. He felt the quality of the bedding. He felt the quality of the pillows. He felt the quality of the quilts, and he wanted to know everything about the night shelter. And what resonated with me from that visit was not one bit of negativity about what we were supplying people. And I had put it to him that, what did he think? If he was the First Minister, what would he think about this night shelter? And he was very, very clear within his video that day that at the moment, night shelters are needed. And he was for night shelters if night shelters needed. He said, but he would obviously be looking forward to when the day that night shelters were not needed. But right now, if they're needed to protect people from outside and outside of harm and violence and stuff like that, then he was for night shelters. He sat and he had tea, he had sandwiches, he had chats with Mary, he still have pictures and videos of him and Mary, and he had chats with all the other services.
Who's Mary?
So Mary is a wee lady who comes to use our service. Mary is in her 80s, has dementia, and the only hot meal Mary gets is at our service. And she needs our service, and she needs our support, so she does.
And not just for food, somebody to talk to.
Humanity. She needs somebody to talk to.
And Alex sat down and talked to her.
Alex sat down and talked to her, and I always remember that Mary fist pumped him. He went to shake her hand because she was a lady, and she went, no, boof, and she fist pumped him, and I have a picture of that. And she recognised who he was. She was overwhelmed to meet him, and she kind of looked at him as like the King of Scotland.
Now, you sent me a lovely message, Colin, when Alex passed, and I truly felt that you felt the loss greatly.
Yeah.
Just your thoughts on Alex, the man, the human being. You mentioned humanity was the thing that was missing.
Yeah.
What would you say about Alex?
When I heard about Alex, the first thing that came to my mind was that Scotland's voice was gone. That was it. And I just kind of felt that there was no hope for the country now. He was the hope. He was the piece of structure that I mean, it was a voice for homeless people. It was a voice for vulnerable people. It was a voice for businesses. It was a voice for the country. And he was well and truly shafted. And they battered him to a pulp to make him, they thought, was as weak as possible. But he wasn't weak. He was a very, 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 very strong man. So he was. And I looked up to him when I was a member of the SNP. I looked up to him when he was the First Minister, and it was somebody who I thought I would never get to come visit my charity. No one time, but 3 times.
3 times. And he did, as leader of the party I'm proud to chair, the Alba Party. Such lovely comments, Colin. But you know that Alex would tell you just to keep doing what you're doing, as he said, for as long as it's necessary, although he's sad that it had to be the case, but he'd tell you to keep going. So I'm going to ask you in your last comments, what is it that needs to happen to deal with the crisis of homelessness in Scotland?
People need to step up and deal with the problem. And if they're not strong enough to step up, then they need to be big enough to step down. And they need to step aside and allow somebody to step in and deal with this problem and deal with this issue. So what I would say to everybody who's watching this show, politicians, human beings, is get behind the homeless, get behind people who are suffering in this country, and let's deliver what people need.
Colin McInnes, Homeless Project Scotland, thank you so very much for joining me on Scotland Speaks. And with that, we come to the end of this week's show with Colin's message, which I hope will resonate far and wide. Please do support Homeless Project Scotland. And with that, from me and all of the team here at Scotland Speaks, it's goodbye. Please keep your messages coming in. Send some messages in for Colin and some support, and all of his team of volunteers at Homeless Project Scotland. And we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.